a couple of announcements, just kind of like checking in with you all. So first of all, hey, already you graded your midterms and everybody did pretty well. So your midterms have been graded. I am currently going to start grading your visual argument papers and your discussion posts that you had due last week as well. So I will be grading all of those during this week. So I just wanted to inform you of that. I'll be catching up on grading. We also have one more week left of classes. How weird is that? It's incredible. Time has gone by so quickly. So we have one more week left of the summer session. With that being said, make sure that for next week, you submit all of your work on time, that you are not falling behind on anything, because the last thing we want to do is we don't want to really prolong the grading process. We want to make sure that all of your stuff is submitted and done by next Friday at 11:59 p.m. so that I could literally like do all the grading for classes, right? So that I can get all the grades submitted really quickly, efficiently. It can go on your transcript really quickly. So make sure that you submit all your work on time and all of that is done. Also, just to kind of like talk about what we have in the next couple of weeks before the semester is done. So we have for this week, we have a discussion post due. We also have a quiz. And this week you will be seeing the guidelines of your interpersonal argument paper. That will be your final paper for the class. That will be your final assignment. But we also do have a final exam that you will be taking that looks very similar to the midterm. So the interpersonal argument paper will be the last major assignment for the class, and it's a paper with a presentation on Flipgrid, the same thing that you did with your visual argument paper, but in your interpersonal argument, obviously it's a different prompt and it has like different requirements, but you will also be required to film a presentation just the same way that you did for your visual argument paper. So I just wanted to fill you in on that. So that's what you'll have due. So next week you have the paper, the presentation due, and you also will have your final. This week I will see if I can I will try to open up your module this week on Saturday morning so that you have more time to complete and you can get things done quicker. Again, like I was saying, I'm the type of person who likes to get grading done super fast, mostly close to the end of the semester, so that we don't I don't affect anyone's transcript or any prereqs for any other classes. So I like to get them done as soon as possible. So I will open the module on Saturday so that you can have more time to complete and you can get it done quicker. So those are the announcements that I want to go over. Again, I will be catching up on grading. Hopefully by the end of this week, I will be all up to date with all of your grades. And I will definitely be opening up the module earlier. So I just wanted to kind of like talk about that a little bit. So today, there are a couple of things that I wanted to talk about today. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is I wanted to talk a little bit about chapter 13, which is argumentation in politics. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about chapter 14. On Thursday, we will be talking about argumentation in interpersonal relationships, which is chapter 16. And we will be talking about just basically, how it affects interpersonal relationships and all of that. Also, I wanted to do a quick announcement. So for next week, we will be having a lecture on Tuesday, but we won't be having a lecture on Thursday, just because, there's no other material to discuss on Thursday. And I also want to give you that extra time so that you can work on your final and get it done as soon as possible. So we have a lecture on Thursday and a lecture next Tuesday, and the following Thursday, we have no more lectures because I want you to work on your assignments and get them done as soon as possible. So really quickly today, I wanted to talk about argumentation in politics. And I just wanted to talk about basically, like what happens in argumentations in politics, all of that. Uh, just kind of like quickly talk about how politicians are judged and all of that. So let's see really quickly. see. There you go. Perfect. Okay. So in this chapter, in chapter 13, we kind of talk a lot about, we talk about argumentation in politics, and you have heard me talk about this, I think, throughout the semester. The fact that political debates are not really debates, they're kind of more of a press conferences, more like press conferences. So think of it more of a kind of like as a, you know, as an interview for candidates to get exposure and for people to just get to see them in action, quote unquote, or in like really tough situations and to see how they would handle, you know, a tough situation, as opposed to it being an academic debate. As we talked about last week, you see that academic debates are very structured. You know, they have like different parts. You have a constructive, you have cross-examination, you have a rebuttal, everybody has a return, everybody respects speaking turns and all of that, right? In a political debate, it's not like that because it's not really a debate, it's more of a press conference. Another thing that I kind of wanted to highlight before I jump into the importance of the character and the image of a candidate, I really wanted to go over one of the things that the author highlights in the book, which is basically the each candidate when they are running for, you know, presidency, for governor or any of that, each candidate usually chooses a political myth to go with. Now, when we refer to political myths, we are referring to kind of like a story or a selling point of their campaign, a story or selling point for the campaign in which they can amass a large amount of the voters. And there are two political myths that the author discusses. One of them is the materialistic myth, and then the other one is the moralistic myth. The materialistic myth refers to a candidate appealing to, you know, just basically economic aspects, right? So more jobs, taxes, unemployment rates, helping small businesses, like student loans, addressing anything that has to do with like kind of like financial aspects. That's what the capitalistic or the materialistic myth fits into. So if we can see, usually like some candidates fall into that area of the materialistic myth, in which they are just like really focusing on what they can do for the economy and how they can make the country make more income, or just like the average citizen, how they can guarantee that their economics / financial success will be good after, you know, we cast a vote for this person. So that's the materialistic myth. The other myth that the other political myth that is often used by politicians is the moralistic myth. And as opposed to the materialistic myth, the moralistic myth kind of focuses more on social issues. So candidates who talk about immigration, who talk about marriage, who talk about family values, education, equality, all of that is more of the moralistic myth. So social justice, social issues. And again, like we can see that most candidates, like they probably will try to touch up on both, but either or of the candidates who are running for presidency will fall underneath one of those categories more heavily, even if they touch on both. So I just wanted to kind of like review the idea of the moralistic and the materialistic myth, and how candidates, when they are running for presidency or for any political office in general, just kind of choose one of those myths to go with. And another thing that I wanted to talk about is the idea of image politics. Believe it or not, there was a time not too long ago, there was a time where the political image of a candidate wasn't a big deal. Now, I know that that seems like really like far off. It just seems like it would happen in another galaxy or something like that. But the first political debate that was televised was the debate between Kennedy and Nixon. I was in the like 50s, 60s ish. That was the first political debate that was televised. And the reason, and let me just kind of like give you a little bit of background on that. So before that, all the political debates were transmitted through radio, right? So people would sit down, listen to the political debates. So they would vote on the candidate without actually seeing what the candidate looked like physically. And when they surveyed people who actually watched the live televised debates versus their radio, you know, debates, people had different ideas of who was the most appropriate candidate. So people who listened to the radio broadcast of the political debates, they thought that Nixon was going to win the election because his argument and his speaking, he sounded like he knew his stuff, right? But people who watched solely the televised debates, they were like, no, Kennedy's the one that's got it. And two different polarized views. And the reason why is because President Kennedy was really good on camera. He was the first person who wore makeup, who knew how to like dress for the camera, how to look at the camera, do the hair, like gestures and all of that. Nixon refused to even wear makeup when it came to the televised debates. So he looked awkward compared to Kennedy, who looked super natural, super friendly, like your average person that you would like, we often hear the saying, a person who you would have a beer with. He literally looked like that, as opposed to Nixon, who looked really stiff and uncomfortable. So you can see that, from the beginning of that time, image started to change everything. And at this time, specifically, when we have all these social media platforms, image politics is it, right? So basically, candidates are judged on the way that they look and the way that they have in their public personalities. So if you remember back, a few years ago when Hillary Clinton was the candidate for the election, people were just like judging her so harshly from the way that she dressed, the way that she talked, how she reacted emotionally to different aspects. Was she too emotional? Was she not emotional enough? Right? Same thing with Trump. Like they would judge him based on like how he would stand, what he would wear, how he would shake hands. Like his hair was a big deal, his like tan was a big deal, right? And they're just like judged on the public personas that they set out there. And the question that I often put out there, how does like Biden's image how is his image different from Trump's? And you can just answer in the chat if you want. Let's see. Okay. So we have, so John said bigger. Okay. So definitely we could see that if you kind of go back to the political debates, you see that definitely Trump kind of like occupied more space in the political debates. He's definitely like looked like he was, had like a bigger persona, while Biden was a little bit more soft-spoken, more kind of like calm when it came to the political debates. Also, thank you, Imelda. Biden has showed a lot more experience because he has like all the situations that have happened to in his life. He lost his son, his first wife, and his daughter. So he's had like so many things happen to him. So he definitely does have not only more experience in life but in politics as well. And like a lot of people were seeing that Biden was like very like calm, like grandpa type of style, while Trump was like really aggressive, loud, obnoxious, whatever. People were just saying like different things. Or some people were saying that Biden was like too soft, that he was like gonna die soon, he looked weak. People just like they really literally go ham with both candidates, so we definitely can see that their public personalities, like we don't know these people, like we don't personally know Donald Trump, we don't personally know Joe Biden, we don't know them, so we don't really know who they are like. We just only see the public persona that they set out there. And basically, one of the things that's really, really interesting is that voters want candidates with character. So when you see, and Donald Trump had a great way of showing that. So character usually, like when it comes to political debate, so the candidate that's more aggressive, that kind of like overpowers the political debate, is usually who's seen as the character who has like the candidate has the strongest character, who is a go-getter, who's aggressive, who's assertive, who's strong. So a lot of people are wondering, like, oh, like, why is it that, Hillary Clinton didn't win and Donald Trump won? Well, because Donald Trump definitely seemed more aggressive, more stronger, like he had a stronger presence on stage as opposed to Hillary Clinton. So, that also contributed to that. And again, like when people are looking at candidates or their public personas, they're looking at somebody who they can trust, somebody who looks honest, somebody who looks competent. Definitely the idea of competency is something that we look for. So again, when we have candidates just coming in and just showing us how they're competent and all of that. And again, like with former President Trump, one of the things that he had going on for him was the fact that, he wasn't experienced, he wasn't a politician. He was an experienced business person, and he just wanted, to make the economy like great, or whatever it is that he was saying, right? And that contributed. And the fact that, the whole Hillary Clinton scandal with, Bill Clinton definitely affected her, because, it wasn't somebody who was honest, or somebody who couldn't trust, because, her spouse did all those horrible things or whatnot. Anyhow, I just wanted to highlight the importance of politics, and really quickly just kind of like go over how like campaigns are different from campaign arguments are political debates. So like I was saying, political debates are definitely very different from academic debates. There is no evidence, very little evidence. That doesn't exist, right? So and mostly in the previous election, we had the poor people who were fact checking everything that the candidates were just like spewing out. It's definitely like, they were having like a field day with that, right? Because most candidates just kind of like spew out numbers and all of that. And because like we don't really like expect them to have like political, peer-reviewed articles or anything like that, kind of like you would have in your academic debate, where you need articles to kind of back up what you're saying and you need to cite them. In a political debate, that's not something that is expected. It's very little evidence. They're not evaluated harshly by like a judge. Like the mediator is there to kind of just like more handle behavior situations, but they're not there to kind of just like say like, oh, like this person won. Like, as you can see, after every single political debate, you can go on CNN, MSNBC, or Fox, and you will see different views of who won the debate, right? Depending on what side they're on. So there's not really like a judge who says who wins and who doesn't. And they don't need to clarify as much information. Again, when it comes to an academic debate, you see that there's a specific structure. There are specific areas that you have to cover in each one of the sections of your academic debate. In your political debate, you don't have to do that. It's, again, like I said, it's more of a political conference. You can choose what and how to answer. A lot of people get frustrated because they're like, well, this person didn't answer the question. They don't have to. They can avoid answering the question. They don't have to answer because it's not required. Again, nobody's evaluating them. They're just doing it to get the exposure. So one of the things that I found really interesting is that a few years ago, I had a student who said, so political debates are kind of like beauty pageants. So like you just like parade them out, see who looks better, and we vote for who looks better. And I'm like, yeah, kind of. It's more kind of like a beauty pageant rather than an actual academic debate. So next time, following election, which I think is 2024, and in California, we have the election for the governor coming up. But anyways, in any future elections, when you're watching political debates, lower your standards by a whole bunch, because they're not meant to be like serious or answering your questions. It's more like a press conference or a beauty pageant. Think of it like that. And with that being said, I'm going to hop onto chapter 14, because I feel like I've touched upon what I wanted to touch on chapter 13. Unless any of you have any further questions, I would love to hop on chapter 14. All right, let's do that. Let's hop onto chapter 14. And chapter 14 is absolutely one of my favorite chapters, just because before I actually went into communication studies, I chose communication studies for the sole purpose that I wanted to go to law school. So fun fact about me, I actually didn't even think about teaching. Teaching was not my first choice. I wanted to become an attorney, but then I started interning at a law firm, kind of got a little disappointed of how the system worked out, decided that I would do better teaching. But I do have a minor in political science, so like this chapter is absolutely my favorite chapter in the whole book. besides the visual arguments. That's a really good chapter too. But really quickly, like, I gave you a whole section on the Canvas page talking about the difference between a civil and a criminal case, but I quickly want to go over it over here. So basically, when we are talking about a civil case, it's a case that it's basically it's kind of like it has to do a lot with private property, and it has to do with financial damages. So one person damaged somebody else's private property, or some type of like there's some type of negligence, and the outcome of a civil case is not jail time or anything like that. The outcome of a civil case is financial reparations. So for example, if I'm walking my dogs outside and there is a dog that attacks one of my dogs, I would go to a civil court and sue for financial damages of, the other dog attacking my dog, right? That's what a civil case is. So when we see civil cases, we see things like divorces, we see bankruptcy, people who don't pay their rent on time, things like that are civil cases. And when we talk about a civil case, the type of evidence required for you to win a civil case is called the preponderance of evidence. Now, let me break that down for you all. So the preponderance of evidence refers to you only need to be a little more believable than the other side to win a civil case. So think about it in percentages. Think about it as 51% versus a 49%. You only need to be 51% believable as opposed to the opposing side's 49%. So there's no, so you just have to be a little more right, and you have to prove your case a little bit better than the other side in order to be granted those financial reparations, or in order for the case to favor you. So a civil case, when you think about a civil case, think about stuff that happens in like Judge Judy, right? That's a civil case. And yes, like some of these things are scripted and whatnot, but the idea of what happens in a civil case, think of it as Judge Judy. Now, as opposed to a civil case, a criminal case is basically when you have violated a law and against either your community or the government. And the outcome of that would be either you are acquitted or you will have to serve some jail time, serve jail time and pay money, or pay money. It just depends. But you have to have violated a law from a community or the government. And a criminal case is definitely requires a whole lot more work than a civil case. In a criminal case, you have to select a jury, you have a judge, you have like way more time to collect evidence to prove your point. And again, the outcome of it will be like either like a jail time or prison time, and a fine as well, either or both, right? When we think about a criminal case, the way that we decide who wins a criminal case is called beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, the idea of beyond a reasonable doubt refers to you have to have enough evidence to prove to an average person that's just looking at the case that that person is 99.9999% guilty of committing the crime. So you have to be 99.9999% sure that that person did it. Again, as close to 100% sure that the person committed the crime. Now, with that being said, there's that 0.00001 percentage that, the person didn't do it, right? But the beyond the reasonable doubt guarantees that you're almost 100% certain that the person did it. Of course, there are cases we have seen in the past with, capital punishment cases that, people end up being, after years that the person has been put, to death, we see that that person wasn't really guilty. And it's because we didn't have the technology lack of evidence and all of that. Fortunately, the criminal system has evolved a little bit more, and we definitely have much more technology available to us. But again, there's still that 0.01% that things, especially when it comes to death row cases, that the person might be innocent, but the percentage usually tends to be very small. So again, civil case, think of it 51 versus 49%. Criminal case, 99.999%. Sure. And for those of you who are curious, I wanted to go into criminal law. That was my thing. Okay, moving on. So let's talk about the system of law. So the law system, there are several things that we trust the system of law, or there are some things that we can assume about the system of law. And here are those things. First thing is that our system of law is called an adversarial system. When we talk about an adversarial system, we're talking about two parties with opposing opinions competing against one another. And there's a third party who gets to decide which one of those positions presented their argument the best. And again, so when we think about it, in our political system, we have the judge and we have the jury, right? Those are those like third party that kind of evaluates the arguments of both sides, and they decide which side is more believable and has, you know, kind of like met their burden of proof. And for those of you who are wondering, back in the day, we didn't have an adversarial system, folks. When the colonies, came about and they started, we had a system that it was called the inquisitional system, which was basically yourself against a judge who would decide whether you were guilty or not. And that was it, like based on what you had to say. And that's why, we had like our colonies, the revolution and all that happened because we thought that that was like really unfair. And we wanted to be judged by a jury of our peers, which is what ended up happening. And that brings us up to juries. Another thing that we have in our system is the idea of citizen jurors. So those like really annoying notices that you get if you are an American citizen, those really cool notices that you get to show up for jury duty, and that a lot of us are just like, what a pain in the butt that is. Basically, think about it this way. There was a time when you had to present your case against one judge and they would decide whether you were guilty or not. And our ancestors fought so hard for us to have ordinary citizens kind of look at the case and decide and see. Now, the advantages of citizen jurors is that, they're people who are not biased when it comes to law. They are not people who have a lot of knowledge about their law. They just kind of like look at things with common sense, and does it make sense to them that this person committed this crime? Now, one of the kind of like the jurors kind of like adds more the emotional, more kind of like humane side to cases, because it allows the jurors to kind of like feel out people, see the emotions, just kind of like look at the whole evidence put together without having that kind of like law lens to kind of like obscure the way that they see things. And it just allows them to kind of give another input to the judge and to the system. And it also allows us as citizens to kind of like be part of the government and just get involved. Again, most people do not take jury duty seriously. They think it's very annoying. I actually do teach a class that is kind of like the more advanced version of this class at CSUN, which is called Legal Argumentation, where I spend the entire semester talking about the legal system, cases and all of that. And we spend a whole lot of time talking about how jury duty actually makes a big difference, because in some cases, jury duty has saved people. So just wanted to throw that out there. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is I wanted to talk about the attorney-client relationship. So most of us have probably heard in the past that when it comes to like medical records and all of that, your doctor is not allowed to release any information because it's private. doctor-patient confidential. They're not allowed to share it unless the government gets a warrant or a subpoena to kind of like get that information. The same thing is with an attorney. So an attorney has that resolution, that has that idea going on. But let me just quickly talk about dispute resolution. So when we're talking about kind of like what happens in a court of law, we're trying to see what happened. Even when it comes to a civil case, you're trying to figure out what happened and who is a person who is guilty for what happened. And we're also, a lot of the decisions in both civil and criminal cases are based on precedent. And when we talk about precedent is that there are cases in the past that have occurred. And obviously we keep cases, like, you know, most of these cases, big cases or even smaller cases, are available to the public after, you know, the decision has been put out there. So you can like Google any of these cases. You can Google, I'm pretty sure that at this point, the George Floyd case has probably been made public at this point. So you can probably Google it and see the entire transcript of the decision and what happened. But we keep records of all the cases that have happened in the past. And when a judge is trying to make a decision, judge or jury are trying to make a decision of a case, they look at previous cases that have been decided in the past. And we often tend to decide similar cases based on similar ones that have occurred in the past. So that's what the idea of precedent is. Obviously, a lot of the precedents can be overturned. So for example, if the way that a case was decided 20 years ago doesn't really like make sense now, the decision might be overturned, it might be changed, and they might give a different decision. Also, when it comes to criminal cases, the prosecution or the side who is, you know, in the side of the government, of the community, etc., is the one who has the burden of proof, which means that they're the ones who have to prove that the defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So the defense, the only thing that the defense has to do is it has to show that the client kind of like refute the evidence of the prosecution. They just have to demonstrate that whatever the prosecution is saying is not true. But the prosecution has the burden of proof of beyond reasonable doubt. And again, kind of like what I was hinting at the very beginning, the attorney-client relationship is very important. It's very similar to the doctor-client privilege in the sense that basically, why and how is it important? Well, when you are a client and you go to an attorney, even if you're going in for a consultation, anything that you say to the attorney does not leave the room. So if you're thinking about like, well, I wonder if like, you know, criminals who are guilty or serial killers and stuff like that, do they tell their attorneys that they committed the crimes? In most cases, yes, they do. They do accept that they have committed the crimes, and the attorney has to just go ahead and defend them because it's between the client attorney privilege. So so I was watching a case a couple of weeks ago in one of those documentaries, and the attorney, when the client came in, the attorney, it was Gacy, John Wayne Gacy, which is the guy who dressed up as a clown and killed young boys. If you are curious to see it, just Google clown killer John Wayne Gacy. That's the guy. So I was watching a documentary on that, and his a defense attorney came out and he said, yeah, this guy, you know, came over to my house one night or to my office one night, and he just like confessed to me everything that he did. So he knew of everything that he had done, but the American system is great in the sense that it allows it says that everybody, no matter whether you're guilty or not guilty, has the right to representation in a court of law. So so even if your attorney, and your attorney should know whether you're guilty or not so that they can kind of like spin the story. Even if your attorney knows that you're guilty, then you still have the right to be represented in a court of law. It's a right that you have. So that's one thing that I wanted to throw out there, which I know kind of like throws us off, but I mean, it is what it is. I mean, like even like the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, like which was another serial killer. He also had attorneys, and the attorneys knew what he had done, but he still had attorneys that became very high profile attorneys after the case. But anyways, that's a story for another day. So that's what I wanted to talk to you all about today. Hopefully you have more of a clear view as to what argumentation, how argumentation kind of like contributes to politics and how it contributes to obviously court of law. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. And on Thursday, please make sure that you're here on Thursday, because on Thursday we will be talking about arguments and interpersonal relationships, and I will be going over the guidelines for your paper, kind of giving you an example of what to do, and I will also be going over the rubric. So be here on Thursday. And with that being said, you're free to go. I hope you all have a good week. Stay nice and cool since it's super hot and it's about to get even hotter. So y'all take care and stay safe.